This is the American Indians, Indigenous Peoples Truce. Justice for all. The most dangerous show on media anywhere. OCO, Taishu, Shadana Lai, Ayajagola Waya Sonoy. I'm Jay Winter Nightwolf, and this is News from Indian Country with my brother and my tribal member, Judge Don Walker. Take it away.
Good evening. Our news this evening comes from Jacqueline Estes, Indian Country Today, and it is about the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan Act. Is new federal funding going to be easier to spend than last year's COVID aid? Tribes and multitude of others will be finding out in coming months and years. The $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan Act is designed to soften and relieve pandemic impacts. The bill will be signed into law on March 11th, allocates money for everything from cybersecurity, unemployment benefits, and homeland security to potable water. Recipients will include healthcare providers, small businesses, homeowners and renters, airports, schools, state and local governments, among others. Of the rescue funds, about 1.5%, or an estimated $32 billion, will go to Indian Country. Hang on here for a second. I got a couple of pages crossed up. The Harvard Kentucky School Ash Center for Democratic Conveyance and Innovation every 2 weeks is holding a 1-hour webinar, which are open to the public, on how tribal nations and tribal affiliated nonprofits can navigate and make the most of the opportunities. The first two sessions were held May 26th and June 9th. Panel moderator Karen Diver, Chippewa, is senior advisor on Native American affairs to the University of Minnesota president, former special assistant on Native American affairs to the president, and a past chairwoman of the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. She said tribes struggle to comply with funding requirements under the 2020 Carnivorous Aid Act and Economic Security or CARES Act. They faced short deadlines, unclear and changing directions from the Treasury and Interior Departments, and other constraints, all while grappling with pandemic emergency response. Now, there's 4 times as much money on the table. Diver said some liken it to the U.S. aid to Western Europe to rebuild after World War II, calling it the Marshall Plan for Indian Country, the largest influx of cash and resources that we have seen ever in the Indian Country. Indian country has a once in a lifetime opportunity in several generations to get the resources that have so long been withheld from the federal government and apply those resources to build and rebuild tribal nations, said Ford Foundation professor emeritus Joseph Talt of International Political Economy and co-director, Harvard Project on American Indian Economics. This is one bucket with $32 billion in money set aside for federally recognized tribes and programs. Let's hope they can get their act together on this and make it so we can navigate and put it to good use. Jay, back to you.
All right. So we're going to go to introducing our guest for this evening. This is a very, very interesting show. And I want to say hello to Sandra Hope. Hey, Sandra, how are you?
Jay, hello, my Cherokee, Shoshone, and Taino Blindian.
Thank you.
There's Blindians in the house. There's Blindians everywhere.
Absolutely. So let's go back to the full screen. I want to see everybody's face, and I will introduce them one by one. I know all of these people, friends of mine. I'm going to start with my brother up there in the corner from Minnesota. I think that's how they pronounce it. Spike Moss. Spike, how you doing, bro?
Real good, brother.
All right. Spike Moss is the past president of the NAACP for the state of Minnesota. He's been a freedom fighter and a fighter for rights and justice for a very, very long time. And I'm so happy that he's here with us tonight because we got something we got to discuss that only us can discuss, not them, but us. Anything else you want to mention about yourself before we go to the next one, Spike?
Well, I've been on the front line here since 1966, fighting human rights, civil rights, and police brutality in this state since 1966. I wasn't the president of the NAACP, but I was the president of a whole lot of Black organizations that actually frontline fighters in this state. And as you witnessed this year, since 1966, for the first time in my state, a white person was finally arrested, finally charged, finally went to jail, and finally going to be sentenced from 1966 to 2021 before one white man was arrested for harming a Black person or a Native American in the state of Minnesota.
Okay, thank you, Spike. So now we're going to go to Dr. Carmen Johnson. Carmen, how are you?
I am doing just fine, thank you. Pleased to be here.
Absolutely, it's one of my buddies, Dr. Johnson. Anything you want to tell us about yourself before we get started?
I am on my way back to the Supreme Court as of tomorrow. So it goes up for conference tomorrow, June 24th. So I'm excited about that. And I'll just leave it at that. This is my second trip to the Supreme Court.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much, Carmen. Let's see. Who do I want to talk about now? Judge Don Walker. Friends for years. Don Walker is a member of my tribe, the Cherokee Nation, and he's a retired Chief Magistrate of the Supreme Court of Virginia. Don, anything else you want to tell us about you?
Jay, I think you got most of it covered, with possibly the exception that you and I are very close Cherokee brothers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So now let me go to another good friend of mine for many years, Judge Hassan Amin. He's a retired judge I believe it's the circuit court, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. Prince George's County, Maryland. How you doing, Judge?
I'm doing very well, Jay. Thank you very much.
Anything you want to add about yourself?
Well, I want to let folks know that I cut my teeth in the freedom movement under the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I joined the then Nation of Islam in 1972 and became Vernon 7X. And my basic training was to sell Muhammad Speaks newspapers and fish, whiting H&G. And when we had to, sardines, eggs, bean pies, and gingerbread, door to door. I began practicing law in 1983. And after 17 years at law, was tapped for the district court bench of Prince George's County and elevated in 2011 to the circuit court, becoming actually the first judge in the history of Maryland to be of the Muslim faith. And when they asked me, how can you be a judge and administer the laws of America and be a Muslim, I told them that I belong to the same community as Muhammad Ali. And I balled up my fist and said around the table, anybody got a problem with that? And guess what?
Nobody had a problem.
Everybody submitted. So I'm very blessed to be here, very blessed to have known and loved you, Jay Winter, since the first day I laid eyes on you and you on me.
Absolutely. And I appreciate all of that love and affection, my brother. Okay, so now I'm going to go to another friend of mine. His name is...
I can have friends too.
Okay, so do that on Facebook. So anyway, Rudy Arredondo. He's the national president. He's the national president of the Latino Farmers and Ranchers Association, and a very good friend of mine for many years. Rudy, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my family came to the United States undocumented, and we were farm workers. We traveled to the United States following the crops. I started working in the fields when I was about 5 years old. And I'm one of the Cesar Chavez disciples of the United Farm Workers Union. I'm still a volunteer. I still do work with them. And 2005, I founded the National Latino Farmers and Ranchers Trade Association, which I preside over, and we represent over 75,000 Latino farmers and ranchers throughout the United States. And we're happy to be here, and Jay and I have been friends for at least 20 years. Exactly. My God, that's a long time.
What are you trying to say? What are you trying to say? Thank you, Rudy. Thank you. Now let me go to another friend of mine. He's my brother from another mother. And he was also Congressman John Conyers' legal legislative authority for his entirety in Congress. He wrote the AIDS to Africa bill. He wrote what is now known as Obamacare bill. He's written a lot of bills.
Yeah.
His name is Joel Seagull. Joel, how you doing, bro?
Doing very good. Honored to be with your distinguished guest. And I'm now working with Rudy as the Director of Federal Affairs for Latino Farmers and Ranchers. I'm really enjoying that. And I authored the bill Medicare for All, HR 676. I did draft portions of the Affordable Care Act. I was the lead staffer on that bill. I've spent most of my career, fighting for people who are homeless, out of work, out of jail, uninsured. I was myself, I grew up uninsured. Unfortunately, I did spent some time homeless due to some disabilities that I have, and I just fight for people who need, representation. And known you, Jay, for years. You were one of the only people in radio that gave our movement an opportunity to express ourselves. So it's great to be with you and Sandra.
And
Absolutely.
don't
And I
forget
got a little
badass bass player.
Oh yeah, you took the words out of my mouth.
Thank you.
He's the funk. He's a funk master when it comes to the bass, and a very
That's
good.
what I'd rather do.
Yeah, I know. I heard him play one time, and I said, "Wait a minute, is that Bootsy Collins or what?" And then they introduced him. Oh, that's Joel Siegel. I said, "That's a white boy playing a bass like that?" And he said, "I'm not a white boy. I'm a Jew. I'm your brother." Okay, good.
You never heard the song "Play That Funky Music, Jew Boy"?
No. Next is one of my closest friends. He's one of my young friends. His name is Raymond Two Hawks Watson. Ray, I'm gonna let you tell your story because I don't want to mess it up. I already messed 2 or 3 other people's stories up.
No problem, and let me greet everyone properly. Aquani, Nitampagas Katasquampson, Nutuis Nisu Wishwanak, Tomashipag Nahigansa. That is to say, peace be unto you, friends. How are you doing? My name is Raymond Two Hawks Watson. I am from the Narragansett people up here in Rhode Island, way up in New England, smallest state in the Union. For the purposes of this discussion here, current rising 3L student at the Roger Williams University School of Law, focusing in Indigenous law and policy and wills and trusts. And also Director General of the Federation of Aboriginal Nations of the Americas, which is a confederacy of First Contact Nations exercising pre-colonial treaty rights under constitutional law and international law. So I'm very honored and humbled to be a part of this panel tonight. I see some very distinguished individuals on here, and looking forward to hearing some great conversation and learning a few things, and if appropriate, sharing a few thoughts. Thank you very much, Jay, as always, for the opportunity.
You're very welcome. We got another guest that'll be coming on shortly after he finishes his television broadcast. And I think some of you might know this guy. His name is Judge Joe Brown, the television judge that did it all. We'll be talking to him in a few minutes, and we're going to start this conversation in a couple of minutes. The conversation is the June 13th, the Juneteenth lie, the other story, and what you don't know. I'm Jay Winter Nightwolf, and we'll be back in a couple of minutes to get started. Don't go anywhere. Okay, so Sandra, I'm giving it to you for the first 3 or 4 minutes, and I'll be back as soon as I get this dog out of trouble. Don't go anywhere.
Wow. Jay likes to throw those whammies on me. So, okay, our topic tonight is going to be about Juneteenth. And I'm sorry, I'm getting a text. I apologize. So we're going to talk about Juneteenth, and of course there are a couple of different stories about that. We know, of course, that the holiday was approved last week by President Biden, and there are some different views and perspectives on it. So I think why don't we start with this? Let's start with you, Spike. Can you give us maybe a 1-minute response in terms of what you thought when that holiday was approved?
Well, first it was very insulting, 150 years later, that they even want to recognize it. But even though they let the majority of us go before they let Texas go, the question was, how much did that change your life just to be released from the plantation and nothing else? The majority of our people that were caught up in slavery, many of them had never been off the plantation. Their family for generations was born and raised on that land. Most didn't know what town they were in, what part of America they were in, and never left that plantation. So when you tell a people they can go free, they don't even know what direction to go. They have no home, they have no land, they have no food, they have no job, they have no way to even survive. It's just go, you know. And then from that 150 years, never received any reparations, any respect, or any acknowledgement all this time because they wanted to not deal with slavery and the ruthlessness of slavery. So yes, Texas was the last state to let us go, and it started a celebration, but it didn't come with any reparations. This is the same country that was not part of Hitler's movement to rid the world of the Jews, but they felt responsible to give them reparations and help them in Israel and start over. But right here, where they did a Holocaust on African people, never offered even a bag of seed so you might feed yourself when you walk off this land, a potato hole where you can break open some land and eat. You had not even an acre. So when we celebrate the so-called freedom, it is just from slavery. We're not free as men, women, and children on this part of the world to this day. We're not under the Bill of Rights. We're not under the Constitution. All we do is pay taxes, and we pay taxes without representation. And that's how I see the celebration. If you call it a celebration, it just allowed many of us to get out of slavery. Where did we go after that?
I hear you, Spike. You know, I see this whole Juneteenth thing as an insult to people, and it's a pacifier. And I think people of color in this country are tired of getting pacifiers. How about coming with some truth and some real stuff that we need? All they got was a day off, and if you're a federal government worker, you got paid. But private industry didn't recognize it, so you know, it's, to me, I think it's a sham. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
And you know, Jay and Spike, just to supplement what you were saying, Spike, you know, we know the Constitution still says that slavery and involuntary servitude can exist as a punishment for crime if the party's been duly convicted. So it's not entirely abolished. It's just rewritten. So
they've made the prison complex the new plantations.
Right.
Simple as that, you know. You can't get it any clearer than that. So, Judge Amin, your thoughts. Unmute, Judge Amin.
Well, the first thing that drew my attention to the Juneteenth, I would say camouflage, is the fact that it was initiated by the Senate, the same Senate that refused to have any hearings at all on President Obama's last nominee for the Supreme Court, the same Senate that has vetoed everything in the way of liberation and freedom, who filibusters. And you know, that word filibuster rings a bad bell, doesn't it? I mean, that calls up the ghosts of Jesse Helms and Strom Thurmond and every boll weevil senator that has had the temerity to be in the Congress. And so that raised the red flag to me. And as I begin to think about it, I'm saying, oh, this is just another chance for the Negroes to sing and dance. And that's just what we did. I'm a reparations man. And I'm glad that we have Brother Siegel here tonight, because I love John Conyers. John Conyers was a great speaker in our the J. Franklin Bourne banquet that we have in Prince George's County here, and he basically quieted the house when he said, I never will forget. This was pre-Trump, by the way, but he said, I have conducted a comprehensive study of all the presidents of the United States, and I've concluded that George W. Bush is the most stupid, worst president in the history of this country. And you could hear a pin drop. Everybody was shocked, and everybody said, wow, how dare he say something like that? But that's because, see, we have a big bourgeoisie in Prince George's County. We've got a lot of lawyers who, unfortunately, are scared of their own shadow as it comes to really where the rubber meets the road. And this Juneteenth, while it afforded some celebration, is a mask and a diversion from the real struggle, which is the passage of H.R. 40. Without the passage of H.R. 40, and let me quote, let me just quote a little from this book, Randall Robinson's The Debt. You're all familiar with it, but he says on page 204, African Americans will not be compensated for the massive and social injustice inflicted upon them by their government, and until that, there is no chance that American can solve its racial problems. And he says the gap between black and white is structural. It has a 246-year practice of slavery. It's been resolutely nurtured. It is structural. Its framing beams are disguised only by the counterfeit measures, the counterfeit manners of a hypocritical government class. And this Juneteenth is one of those counterfeit measures. I'm sorry to say, it's nice to have a holiday, but let's do something substantive. And tell me, panel, how is it that Shirley Jackson Lee, who's been at least the visible proponent of H.R. 14, was so much in the forefront of Juneteenth, and she actually is the one that gavelled the bill to passage? Being from Texas, I guess I can understand that, but listen, we got to get on the reparations track. We got to pass H.R. 40, and I'm looking forward to hearing Joel talk more about that, because he probably has something to do with the drafting of it.
Okay, Joel, it's on you.
Well, Dr. Johnson wrote something in the chat. Conyers was one of the best, and the way they did him in the end, he did not deserve it, and I agree.
Yes.
It does bother me that Representative Conyers and the decades-long reparations movement that I worked with has gotten no credit whatsoever. And Mr. Conyers was a visionary, and I wish he would get the credit that he deserves. That's number one. Number two, if there was ever a time for reparations legislation, it is now. And it will not happen until progressives of the beloved community come together, draft that bill, and come up with reparations that African Americans deserve. And I think your analogy about Jewish Americans, I'm Jewish, was absolutely correct. The same thing about Japanese Americans who were in the internment camps in World War II, they got reparations. And I think 400 years of cruelty, speaks for itself. And now with voter suppression aimed at Black voters, when does it stop? But I wrote a reparations bill for the city of Charlotte, and I'll tell you, it was very, very challenging. They finally passed a version of it. If we could do it in Charlotte, North Carolina, can't we do it in the Congress? Thank you.
Absolutely. So let me pose this question to everybody. A bit of information. The people in Galveston, Texas, that were given this phony Juneteenth thing, they weren't all Black slaves. There was a large amount of Native American people that had been enslaved and forced to work for nothing. There was a large amount of Latinos, those of us that they call Latinos, but we know that they're no more than Native Americans, just from a different part of the country. And there were also some poor white folks, but they didn't call them slaves. they played on words. They were called indentured servants. But if you work from sun up to sundown and don't get paid for it, then you're a damn slave. Two Hawks.
I'm in full agreement with that, Jane. You know, my people up here in the North have a very, very specific and personal relationship with slavery, going all the way back to 1638 in the Pequot Wars, and then of course continued in the King Philip's War and after that. So yeah, I mean, it definitely all is just word games. We deal with a lot of that up here, the Negro terminology, the colored, and it is really, I think. I'm in full agreement with everyone before me and all of their remarks. I really think it is a pacifier. It's a way to, you know, keep the people focused on something other than what's going to move them forward. And I try to be proactive in those regards. So they had a celebration here in Providence. One of my tribal members was actually the one point of coordinating it. We made it a point to go down there and share the indigenous history with the holiday and the experience we had here in the Northeast, so that people would understand that this isn't just people from Africa thing. This is what America was doing and continues to do, and we can see it, as the distinguished judge said earlier, in the current penal system and how it's just a different form of slavery that's going on. So I'm in full agreement with all of the remarks that have been shared here, and I'm definitely excited to hear about some of the national work that's been going on and how we can start to implement or support here up in the Northeast.
Okay, so Rudy Arredondo, where are you?
I'm here.
Okay.
I just, but the screen is frozen, but that's okay.
Don't worry about
well,
that. You heard me make that comment about our Latino brothers and sisters that were also held in slavery in Tejas, Texas.
Well, you know, that's where I grew up. That's my home state. And, you know, the thing that was, I didn't know anything about Juneteenth until I came to Washington, D.C. But I did experience the disparate treatment of our African-American brothers and sisters when I was in Texas, and including the way that we were treated among our white counterparts. I rode a bus I lived in the country in a rural area, and my sister and I had to walk, it was about a mile, to catch a bus to take us to school. I went to Donna, Texas, which is in the South Texas. There's, McAllen, Edinburgh, so forth. So those of you that might know the geography there. And on my first day of school, I get up on the bus. I know not one lick of English, since everybody that I lived around, including Anglos, they all spoke Spanish. So I get on the bus, and I hear all this yelling and whooping, and I didn't know what it was. But what happened is the bus at that time had 4 benches down the middle. I sat down on the white side bench, and it wasn't until one of the people that were riding the bus, this young lady took me by the hand and took me to the side of where all the Mexicans were sitting. That's my first experience with discrimination. I didn't know what it meant. And I went to a segregated, elementary school. everybody that I went to school with until the 4th grade were Mexican. Then the other thing that I did know was that the African American students were bused. There was no one no, there were no African Americans that I ever met during my entire public school career. But I did know that they would take African American students from the Rio Grande Valley, because there were not that many, and bus them to Weslaco, which was a hike. Okay. And folks would tell me that the bus would pick up, students early in the morning in Edinburgh, and they went to these towns where they had most of the African American community were either worked for the post office or worked in government, and most of them were janitors and cleanup folks. But as a farm worker, and especially in East Texas, they had a Mexican crew and they had an African American crew, and they would put the African American crew on one end of the field that we were picking, whatever that was, and the Mexican farm workers on the other end, and we worked towards each other. And with regard to the continued systemic maltreatment of especially our African American brothers and sisters, has really come to the clarity of what it is that is under Trump. They took off the mask and the niceness, and it became an entitlement of these folks to be able to do this incredibly cruel and humiliating treatment of anybody that wasn't white. How we're going to solve this, I have no idea. But we have to stay strong. We have to stay together. And it's very important because, in my work in rural America, I find that some of the African American community-based organizations are very insular. And by that, I mean, there is and I understand the paranoia is that if they bring anybody else in, it's going to be taking something away from them. And the thing is, it hasn't really permitted us to be able to form the brotherhood and sisterhood that we need in order to be able to fight these discriminatory systemic practices that exist in this country. And I have no faith in the political system at this point. It's always been difficult, and it's been made almost impossible with the likes of Sinema and Manchin, who find interesting words to disguise their racist tendencies.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rudy. I've got, I reached Judge Joe Brown, and we'll get him on in just a couple of minutes. So,
may I raise my hand, Jay?
Sure you can.
I want to say a couple of things. Number one, I'm from West Virginia. I'm from Charleston, West Virginia. I'm proud to be from West Virginia, but I'm also proud to be away from West Virginia. Unfortunately, West Virginia, before we had Senator Manchin, we had Senator Robert C. Byrd. Senator Robert C. Byrd was a hero. And of course, everybody knows he was a former member of the Ku Klux Klan. There is an endemic white supremacy that just permeates that state. It can be broken, but it cannot be broken as a group. You got to be sort of accepted, one person at a time down there in West Virginia, because number one, they're a little afraid of strangers, and if you're black, you only go so far anyway. I'm very proud to have become a member of the community under W.D. Muhammad, Wallace Muhammad, Elijah's successor, who opened up this community from a black nationalistic oriented organization to a universal perspective of Islam. But I am wondering, Mr. Siegel and Joel, and I'm wondering where the Jewish support for reparations is, because I haven't heard anything from our Jewish brethren about reparations for the 250-year Holocaust that we went through. Because as bad as the Holocaust was, the Europeans and the Russian Jews and everyone else whose families were incinerated, gassed, everything else, but still they knew what their roots were. We African Americans have the only people in the world who were uprooted, cut off, and we don't know who we are. We don't know where our ancestors are. And I'm wondering, when are the leaders of the Jewish community going to join with us and support us, if there is an us? That's another problem, because we don't have leadership. The great American Indian nation doesn't have leadership. That since they assassinated King 58 years ago, we haven't had a leader. They assassinated Lincoln back in 1865. The country hasn't had a leader of his caliber. So we got a lot of problems. But Joel, what about sympathy, empathy, and support in the mainstream Jewish community for reparations for Africans of African Americans of African descent? What about that?
Great question, Judge Amin. By the way, it's an honor to be with a judge. I have a law degree, but I wanted to be a judge, but I never got there. So it's an honor to be with you. Jewish community, I come from the Judge Heschel left, progressive, I would say social democratic tradition of the Jewish community. And I would say that this would be a great opportunity to have that discussion with, progressive Jews. I'm a universalist. Personally, but I'm, a proud Jewish person. I think that there is a huge constituency in the Jewish community to be in solidarity with our African American family. And one thing that, as a student of Jewish history and a student of African history, we do come from the same part of the world, and that's Africa and Northern Africa. And I think a lot of Jewish people who they understand that, but also as a people that experienced thousands of years of discrimination, pogroms, there is a particular sensitivity towards oppression of African Americans that we feel. And it's real. And I know it's real. In my heart, I know it's real. And I think this is the time to maybe have some kind of maybe Jay can convene that show where we bring in progressive Jewish leaders and African American leaders, and we form that coalition. And I, for one, would be ready to be in leadership of that initiative. It's time.
Great.
Let me interject something. I'm not here to defend anybody or be against anybody. But I personally know Joel Siegel for the last 30-some years. And I watched him in action, and I watched him behind the scenes, and I watched him get PO'd with a lot of stuff that happened on Capitol Hill when it came to people of color.
Yeah.
I will never forget the conversation I had with him. I think it was the first year that we met. And he says, Jay, I don't understand what's going on. I said, what do you mean? He said, this country was founded on bloodshed. They tried to kill all of your people. And I don't like that. So then he said, what can we do about it? I said, Joe, first of all, you got to remember that you and I are the same. He said, what do you mean? I said, we come from tribal communities. We're tribal people. And that's how the connection was made with me and that brother. So I think we ought to form a coalition out of what we're doing tonight, of people of color, people of the Jewish persuasion, and everybody else. Joel, you can help me do this. We need to put something down where we can all meet, representatives from all nations can meet. I think one of the biggest mistakes is how the United Nations has gotten sidetracked. We need to form our own United Nations. People that really care for each other and about each other. And as a point of interest, I think you all need to know something, that the very first slaves in America were not black people. They were native people. When that idiot, excuse me, Cristobal
Columbus.
Yeah. When he came here, he never came to the United States or America. He went to the Caribbean islands. And when he left, the first trip back to Spain, in the whole of the ship, he had enslaved native people. Raymond, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, Bo. Amen.
And took them back to Spain and had the damn deacons of the villages to sell our people into slavery. So this is nothing new to us. And I think we need to reach across the aisles, even if we have to reach across the aisle and choke somebody. I say, you're going to sit down and listen to this. We need to talk, and we need to come up with not a bunch of yappy, but we need to come up with some real concrete solutions on how we're going to solve this race issue, not just in America, but throughout the entire world. Because this is bigger than just America. It originated in Europe, and they brought that crap over here with them. And when they came here, they didn't come here as free people. They came here because they were escaping the tyranny of the crowned heads of Europe. That's what I've got to say. So, Don Walker, what do you have to say? I've left you out the conversation. I'm sorry, bro.
That's all right, Jay. You've brought in the Native American factor here. We have seen where we talked about the genocide with the Jews and so forth. The biggest genocide in the history of the world was what was done to the First Nations in this country when the Europeans arrived. Now, I know there was a lot of Jews that got killed with the Nazis and so forth, but they didn't quite make it to almost 15 million. I'm glad you're bringing that part up about Native Americans in there, and I think at some point I'd like to see that recognize it. It gets pushed under the carpet nonstop. They never bring anything up about it. And that was the biggest in the history of the world. So and as far as the Juneteenth goes, that's what a surprise. We never had that in our history books. That was nowhere.
Yeah, and I've heard some people liken that that acknowledgement of that federal holiday as a bone, giving the dog a bone to keep him occupied while all this other stuff is going on or not going on. So what are your thoughts about that, Carmen? We know a lot about your past and your history and the things you've been going through with the inequality of the justice system. What are your thoughts about that? Do you consider Juneteenth as a bone? Unmute.
I'm sorry. I thought I was a magician, but I'm not. I consider this new holiday an insult. And the reason why I consider it an insult is because mass incarceration and involuntary servitude, enslavement is still happening to Black, brown, and tan people. So I consider it an insult. And if they wanted to make a difference, they should have gave reparations and mass liberations to
You
the people.
know, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, Carmen.
It's an insult. That's all I have to say. There's so many innocent people that are sitting behind the wall in jails, camps, cages, and prisons. And then they insult us with this right here. And people that look like me and look like you are happy about this. And I was just sickened. And not to mention, I never heard of this before until like last year. So.
Okay, now let me throw some more salt on the wound. While we are here discussing this, and while we are seeking solutions, do you know that the Nestle company, the chocolate company, the Supreme Court, I believe it was, a couple days ago, shot down an issue about enslaving African children on the continent of Africa to pick the cocoa beans and all of that. They're not paying these children. They keep them in cages. But yet and still, Joe Biden has the nerve to sign this fake Juneteenth bill, a holiday. You know, I remember one thing that Dr. King says, none of us are free until all of us are free. So while they're putting this pacifier in our mouths to make us feel good, they're still enslaving children in Africa, a white-owned corporation, Nestle, and they refuse to address it. Somebody need to get to Uncle Clarence Thomas, because I don't think he ever had a soul. And how you can sit back and watch this come before your bench and you don't disagree with it. I don't like that at all. I see our brother has joined us. Judge Joe Brown, how you doing, bro?
All right, how's everybody?
Everybody's fine.
Hey, Judge Joe.
So we're getting into this conversation about this this bill that Biden signed, and I'm gonna call it like it is. It's a phony ass piece of legislation. Its only intention is to pacify Black folks and give them another day to celebrate, dance, and cook out. I don't understand that.
Okay. So what exactly is this Juneteenth crap supposed to be commemorating or celebrating anyway? It is some historical revision. For most of my life, the date was June 19, 1866. They've revised it to 1865 so it doesn't look so bad. Yeah, the Emancipation Proclamation and early 1863, which frees the slaves in the military district of the South. Lincoln does that as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Services. April, let's drop back 3 months before April, January 1865, the 13th Amendment goes out to the states for ratification. That would end slavery. We have April 1865, Lee surrenders to Grant at Appomattox. We have May 1865, Johnson surrenders the last Johnny Reb field army to Sherman. General Sheridan sends a troop of black cavalry to Texas to inform the Negroes there that they are free. They hear their black brothers and they don't believe them. All right. Tennessee becomes the last state to ratify the 13th Amendment that outlaws slavery. And in June 1866, June 19th, there is a U.S. Navy vessel that's docked in Galveston, Texas. The captain looks out and notices that somebody is wielding a lash on the stevedores. He sends his XO down there to see what's going on. The XO comes back, says, Captain, these fools still think they're slaves. By this time, the 13th Amendment has outlawed slavery. So the captain signs a letter, and he has his Marines send the letter or take the letter throughout Texas to tell these damn fools that they've been free for a year and 2 months, a year or 3 years and a half years, if you take the Emancipation Proclamation. And we're supposed to celebrate that when every other black person in the United States of America knew that the Johnny Rebs had had their butts beat. So what are we celebrating? It wasn't the ratification of the 13th Amendment. They could have proposed that as a holiday. It was not the end of the Civil War. That took place more than a year before. So just exactly what are we celebrating? And like you say, Negroes want to bug dance to banjo and harmonica music like they are back on some plantation, like they've been doing, and it's in the month of June, so it gives LGBTQ another way to subsume something associated with black. It's like December 25th being celebrated as Christ's birthday. Eastern Orthodox Church celebrates it either in late February or early March. They moved it from that time to December 25th because the pagans wouldn't stop celebrating Mithras' birthday on the 25th, Odin's birthday on the 25th, Osiris's birthday on the 25th, etc. So now everybody thinks the 25th is Christ's birthday, which it wasn't, and he isn't. They think Estra, the holiday for Estra, behind Estrus, also Isis, also Aphrodite, also Venus, the fertility goddess, has got to do with Jesus coming back out of the tomb, but you have the rabbit and the eggs because it's a fertility celebration. See, they co-opted that one. So quickly, if you want to see how fast they've done it, go on Twitter, hit hashtag Juneteenth, and you will see a rainbow fist come up with it. And they're already claiming it as something that they're celebrating because they have joined forces with the colored folk. You see how quickly that gets done? It's poison. Plus, man, you guys, you've benefited so much with the Democratic Party. See, we gave you a whole new holiday just for you guys. I mean, isn't that enough? I mean, it's all symbolic, isn't it?
It's bullshit. I'm sorry. That's what it is. It has nothing to do with the truth. There's no truth in it at all. And if you really want to be honest about it, ever since the European was chased out of Europe by the crowned heads of Europe and came over here, it's been nothing but hell ever since. You know, I mean, you want to go further back in history? How about King Leopold? They never talk about the millions of Africans that he murdered when he went into Africa.
Yeah, he got a bunch.
Yeah. So, I mean, the devil.
See, colored folk are so damn foolish, stupid, and ignorant. Like, how many? Abaragati, Tutaanani. Everybody wanted to speak Swahili, but speaking of Leopold, Swahili is a pidgin language set up by his folk, the Dutch, the Arabs, using some Bantu as a pidgin language to expedite the slave and ivory trade on the east coast of Africa. It's not an African language, but we want to use a language set up to facilitate a slave trade when we show our Africanness. That's really crazy. Learn Bantu. if you want to, since most of us that have any black ancestry had that from Western Africa. Pick up Yoruba. Sheda Dani. How are you? I'm doing fine.
Hey, Spike, you're studying over there. Tell us what you're thinking.
You don't want to know what Spike is thinking.
No, I'm really listening to what everybody's saying. And the problem I have with it is we're steering the conversation where he's still making all decisions and he's still in charge with our humanity. I disagree. We allow him to be in charge with our humanity.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about the Native Americans, when he arrived here, there was more than 20 million. When he started slaughtering them and finished slaughtering them, it was close to 12 million standing. They lived on 82 to 83% of all the land. When he got done stealing the land, they had 2 and 3%. He wrote up 400 treaties. He broke all 400. So you fight from there as Native Americans. Black people, we lost maybe 150 million in that water alone coming across here, besides that 240 to 250 years of slavery and how many died in slavery. So the first thing for us is we need to stop being what the judge is talking about and declare ourselves a nation. And we got to decide, out of African people, we might not remember which tribe each one of us is from, but we can still declare ourselves a nation and charge this nation with its crimes against our humanity. I don't care if we do it on our own or take it to United Nations. We need to charge this nation with its crimes against our people and then declare what we want in terms of reparations. We need reparations to speak from a point system. Everything we ask for should be a point. We work the land for free. How much land do we want? That's a point. We built all those facilities and buildings. What type of house do we want? 250, but it's a point. $300,000, it's a point. We built all those schools, wasn't allowed to go to school, and then the schools were built with our taxes. We should be allowed to go to any school we want and not pay any money. It's a point. We built those first colleges, and then slaves had insurance put on their head on the ships. A lot of that money went into Marquette and Princeton and places like that. We should go to college with no tuition, but that's a point. We have been forced to live under taxation without representation. We should be exempt from tax. That's a point. We've been asked and forced to fight in every single war with no benefit to ourselves, to come back home to Jim Crow and discrimination, denial of opportunity. We should be exempt from America's wars. That's a point. Because we do a lot of crime, based on the fact we were discriminated, denied, and oppressed, we went to prison. If your prison sentence is 25 to life, we should have an opportunity to go to another country and start over. But it's a point. Once we come up with a point system, we will cover everything we need in terms of our reparations. But we got to start with first being a nation. We can't be disciples and Crips and Bloods. We can't be Negroes, colored people, and the N-words. We're going to have to come together and become an American, African nation and stand up as a nation and charge this country with its crimes against our humanity. But everything we do, we're going to have to do as men and women. We're going to have to listen to what the judge says, first accept the truth about everything, and then begin to listen to our people. The dumbest thing we've done consistently is wouldn't listen to the leaders who are speaking from a free spirit. We run from them and stay with all the nonsense, which has allowed us to stay here from our unwillingness to leave his breast, suck in his breast, and stand up as men and lead our people out into the world, out into a new day. And one of the things you said is extremely important. The Jews were with us side by side through the Civil War. You got to go back together. In this town alone, I fought Native American police cases for 41 years. And you know yourself, Nightwood, when we started the coalition against racism in sports and media, I was asked to be one of their national spokespeople. I spoke all over this country. Our biggest battle was the Redskins. We finally got rid of that name. We changed names all over the country in colleges. It's what we do forcefully. It's not about what he lets us do. It's not about what he tells us to do. It's about grabbing our manhood as people of color who have the right to live on this part of the world where we live now and stand up and demand our own treatment as human beings. I don't ask him for nothing. When I used to go to meetings and he tell me no, I find another way to shut him down. When they built this freeway through this community, I went there. You're about to come through the black community. How many blacks you got working? How many blacks you got with contracts? They said none. I said, well, what time you get in this mud? He said 4 o'clock. I said, 6 o'clock. I said, we'll be in the mud at 4 o'clock. Tell them don't get on no tractors, don't get on no trucks, because we're going to be serious about these jobs. We're going to whoop everybody who gets on. And that's what we did till we won it. We got to do whatever we do as men to change our destiny, but not look for the person who's oppressing us to give us something like a holiday. He don't need to give me nothing. If we stand up, we'll take it for ourselves. James Brown said it clear in a song years ago. I don't want nobody to give me nothing. Open the door, I get it myself. So if you don't open the door, that means I got to knock it down.
Woo!
Amen. Amen.
Hallelujah.
Amen.
Okay, Raymond. Raymond,
One question. If we get a nation state, where is it going to be? How do we defend it?
First of all, where our population is really growing and excelling and educated right now is Georgia. We have too much education to act like we don't know what to do. Our ancestors built empires for generations, education for generations, first reading, first writing, first math, first medicine.
Okay.
72, 73 scales of music. I'm saying it's in us to build what we need to build.
I'm saying
we're smart enough.
We're gonna take Georgia.
If
that depends on them giving it to us, because we can't take it. They have M1 tanks, M2, M3 Bradleys. They've got B-1 bombers, B-52s, B-2s, F-22s, A-10 Warthogs.
I'm not talking about all-out war with him. We're smart enough to figure this out.
How do we get a state if the state
I'm telling you right now.
Dead, how do we take it?
I'm telling you right now, we're smart enough to figure this out, pull our heads together and figure this out and come with the correct question.
That's the question I'm asking.
Okay, well, let me give you one. Let me give you one.
Get in control. How do we take over?
Let me give you one.
Everybody move to Georgia.
Let me give you just one, Judge. We should have years ago said we ain't going to take part in Christmas and brought them to their knees economically. We should have just said we ain't going to do Christmas. We ain't buying nothing. We would have brought them to their knees with those type of moves to get what we want. And we can't be afraid of being bold. We have to be bold. You've already tried kindness. You already tried peaceful. You already tried nonviolent marches. You're going to have to be bold. And you're going to have to make him feel what you feel to get him to stop. You're talking to a man that lives in Minnesota. Let me tell you about Minnesota. We're the only state that has 6 rebellions before George Floyd died. When George Floyd died, we had 3 more. North Minneapolis, South Minneapolis, and St. Paul. That means we're the only state that has rebelled 9 different times. We were Ferguson before Ferguson, and most of us ain't scared to rebel. We got to get our people to understand you're going to have to rebel. You're going to have to go forward. Well, I'm not joking about it. I'm not joking about it. And I don't want to debate it with you because you're on another page. I'm telling this group, we're going to have to stand up as a people. We're going to have to do it. We're going to have to do it.
I'm not saying don't. I'm just saying where, when.
We've been overdue to do it. We've been overdue to do it.
Those things on a forum like this, there are people listening in. And one of the problems is that you're going to have more informants, snitches, agents, and sworn officers from alphabet organizations inside than you do people who are trying to do what you're talking about.
You're talking about provocateurs. You're talking about provocateurs.
Yes, all of the above.
Right. So let me just go somewhere else for a minute.
And Carmen had a question too, Jay, I believe.
Okay, go ahead, Carmen.
Well, actually, I had a comment, and my comment is the fact that when I stood up, and I'm not afraid of anyone or anything, when I stood up and when I spoke out for our people, Black, brown, and tan, when I looked around, I was left standing by myself. So there was no men standing behind me. There was no women standing behind me. There was nobody standing behind me. So when we talking about coming together, I've been fighting the feds for almost 10 years for helping our people. And I continue to help our people even after this sabbatical that I went on. I still continue to help. I still gotta, beg to get people that look like me to help. And they refuse. So coming together, who's gonna come together?
Okay. I know exactly where you're coming from, Carmen. I really do. But this is getting back to the conversation that we started off with Judge Amin and Joel Siegel, bringing those two communities together. The only thing, and you're right, Spike, the only damn thing that this white man understands, and Malcolm said it too, he's not worried about you killing him or going after his family. He's more worried about the damn dollar than anything else. And the dollar can bring these fools to their knees. And we bring them to the knees and they see we won't buy a damn thing they make or anything else, then they're going to want to come and talk. And when they get to that point that they want to come and talk, then it's time to drop the boom on them. See, one thing I know for sure, and Minister Farrakhan said it and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said it, that we are a nation of people that spend money, but we're not a nation of producers and people that make the things that we need. I'm going to leave that on you, Judge Amin.
Well, thank you. Unfortunately, I guess the conversation got too hot because my internet was disconnected for a while. I had to come down here in the basement where I got the router. The problem is, and the kind of shame of it is, that in order to achieve justice, which to me, the biggest part of it is some recognition and then compensation, recognition of the harm that we have been through as people of color and people of African descent and of Native American slavery and exploitation. Each of us needs to have a formula. And the shame of it is that we African Americans, we don't have a formula. We don't have the leadership which have come together to say, okay, this is the plan. This is what we need. We have to go to Congress to get that done. I don't know whether the Native American tribes or the nation of tribes actually has a governing body that has set out what would make Native Americans whole. I mean, is it to give back the land that they stole? What about the Black Hills? What about a rent on Mount Rushmore? America should pay Native Americans rent for everything in South Dakota. They should pay Native Americans rent for Montana. They should pay Native Americans big money for the land that they stole, and they know they stole it. They acknowledge they stole it. They acknowledge the treaties that were broken. And they acknowledge now more and more the cost of slavery. Look at Georgetown and all these universities. Look at even the exposés on King Leopold. So at what's happening by God's intervention, and solely His, I believe technology is bringing truth to in front of everybody, so that they can't deny it. That's what happened to our martyr friend George Floyd. Yes, he was a deprived and poor human being who was really a victim of discrimination, victim of his own misdeeds and everything else from the time almost he got out of the cradle. But he was a human being, and that's why the world rallied to his cause, because we're all human beings, and that unites us. So that when injustice is done to any one of us, now media shows that injustice is doing to all of us. But we don't have the integrity as a people, having lost all the leadership, to actually formulate what we need to be done. We got to go to the Congress to do it, and we have the power to force the Congress to do it if we stay united and on focus. I believe we have the power to do that through the Congress for the African Americans, through also Native Americans, and through every minority group, including Latinos in this country.
Absolutely. Damn right. Because you know what we got? If we don't have anything else, we got two things. We got each other and we got the vote.
Got the vote?
Yeah, we got the vote. So somebody, go ahead, Joel.
This is a amazing, fantastic discussion. I'm listening to some of those brilliant people I've ever heard. I do want to say that Representative Conyers he really believed in the beloved community that King promulgated. And we spoke every morning. We spoke late at night for 13 years. We traveled on the road together, and he taught me King, you know, and I got to meet all of King's lieutenants. They were in his office, and I learned from Fauntleroy and, you know, Hosea Williams. I mean, they all had a sense of humor. They were all great leaders. And Conyers used to get a notebook out, and he would write all the organizations across the country that were progressive. And he'd say, how come they don't come together? I'd say, well, you know, I think you could bring them together, sir. And we did for universal health care, for single payer Medicare for all, on global AIDS. But he used to tell me these stories about how back in the 60s and in the labor movement, he would risk his life, you know, when he would go to Selma. And I think love is the most powerful, you know, weapon that we have, and truth and solutions. But there is a need for new leaders who can bring people together, but it has to be a really specific vision of truth and justice for everybody. But it takes leaders who've got experience. I think, Judge Hassan, I think you're right about there's a need for leaders, but I think the young people who were in the streets when George Floyd was assassinated, of all races, creeds, and colors, showed us that it is possible. But that was you know, it was a moment, but we need a movement. And I think it's very possible. But we have the oppressor, in my opinion. I think the Black Panthers had it right. I think so much of it is race and class. And that's that 5 and 10% that want to stay wealthy by dividing all of us. We can't let them win. Thanks.
Okay. Judge Brown, Judge Brown, can you hear me? Is he muted?
No, he's talking.
Oh,
He's muted.
but we can't hear him.
He's muted.
Okay.
You think so?
Yeah,
Yeah, he's
It's
muted.
I see it.
All right, somebody call him on the phone.
Yeah, I think he's talking, but yeah, he's muted.
Yeah. So let's go a step further. Don Walker, you hear all of this. You feel the frustration, and you hear these hearts bleeding together. What are your thoughts so far?
I think that my thoughts so far to clear up some of these serious problems out there needs to be done by example. It needs to be done by people that are lifting themselves up, conducting themselves properly, and trying to go forward in that fashion. I would be impressed with that. I don't, you know, I can't go along with the burning and the looting and stuff like that, but I think, you know, make a statement, make a stand yourself, but improve yourself and prove to the world that you have what it takes to do it properly. And I think that's what we're missing. You know, the world's looking to see that out there. So that's my thoughts on it, Jay.
Okay. Raymond.
Yes, Nightwolf.
What are you feeling right now?
So I heard some really fantastic thoughts. I'm a big fan of passionate discussion. So to me, that was a great discourse between the judge and Mr. Moss. And I think that discussion and that conflict is what ended me up in law school. Because we have to be able to stand up, and we most certainly can't continue to be in a position of victimization where we're always complaining about what happens to us. We're always talking about what they're doing to us. We always talk about how they didn't do this and that, because it gets us nowhere, and it's gotten us nowhere. But at the same token, the law is a very big issue. And Judge Brown asked a very important question. If we were going to start a new nation, where would it be at? You know, and then as I learned more about the law, I realized that that's a significant question. Because you can't just go and take the land. It becomes a national security issue. If you start trying to practice autonomy outside of the U.S. system, you can get in potentially a domestic terrorism issue. So how do you move in this space? And we've been doing some really interesting things with the tribes up here. As I mentioned earlier, our focus is really on looking back. So first of all, establishing who we are, and then what our legal rights are in that capacity. For myself, I go back to two of the treaty signers in the 1600s, my Antinomy and Canonicus. My fourth great-grandfather was chief of the council here in 1881 when they told us we had too much Negro blood to be real Indians anymore and then detribalized us. And then my great-grandfather was chief in 1981 when the South County faction went and got federal recognition. So that was all done by law. That was all done by law. You know, it was all about the law and the way that they changed laws, the ways that they implemented laws to make uprisings illegal. You know, the Panthers start showing up with guns, and now all of a sudden there's gun laws that are passed. So our interest has really been in exploring how we take that passion that Mr. Morse just shared and apply that through a legal lens to enforce our rights. And it definitely does go back to the issue of human rights, because from my understanding in the circle that we're moving in, a large part of the issue is that Black folk here in the U.S. have civil rights, but that's not human rights. So if it's civil rights but not human rights, how are you going to go to the UN and ask for any assistance? How do you argue anything outside of U.S. law? It's a major issue. So we've been exploring those. I'll just share a couple of concepts that we've been exploring here. First is that to Judge Joe Brown's question, well, where is the nation going to be? Well, we're saying it's not necessarily a physical thing. We're still here. We've been on the land. We never left. But let's look at what the claim actually is. And as we understand it, the claim's a commercial claim through the Commerce Clause, that Congress has the right to regulate trade with the Indians. And through taking federal Indian law, realize, well, that's actually what it is. So, okay, where do we go from there? Then we look at 8 U.S.C. 1401B, which gave Indians citizenship in the U.S., with the caveat that it couldn't interfere with tribal property. So we say, okay, well, it's commercial, and there's this conversation about tribal property. Where do we go to explore that? And that ultimately led us to the conversation about trust. So that's why I mentioned my interest is really in indigenous policy and law and in wills and trusts, because we found not only in theory, but in practice, that when we understand who we are, when we've documented it appropriately, and then when we're moving legally, utilizing the same system that at one point we thought was really oppressing us and against us, having learned it better, we're now able to utilize that same exact system to enforce our rights and to back a lot of this nonsense off of us that's going on. And fortunately, not having to do it with raising weapons or anything at them, but with their own laws and interpreting them in a manner that, A, they never expected, and B, that we found to be quite effective. So I say all that to say that to me, this conversation that we're having tonight is the exact type of conversation that needs to be had nationally, internationally, so that everyone has a clear understanding of exactly what's going on here in the U.S., why, despite all of the fighting that the African-American population has done over the years, the progress seems to have been stymied. And I am particularly appreciative of Judge Joe Brown's attention to the agent provocateurs and things of that nature, which is why we've really relied on the tribal system. Because if I'm going to deal with any nonsense, I'll deal with it from my family. You know, I don't need to be dealing with craziness and not knowing what's going on from people I don't know. So we're getting really back to family and then moving together as a family to connect with other families to create what I think it is everyone's discussing tonight. So once again, in our language, we say Katapatush, just thank you for the great dialogue. I'm really hearing some interesting things and exploring how to apply them in the work that I do.
Okay, before we go any further, I want to ask each and every one of you. This is a conversation, like Raymond Two Hawks Watson said, and Spike Moss said, and Joe Brown, and everybody else on this program said. This is a conversation that we need to have. So, okay, somebody's got a radio or something in the background. I can't hear you. But anyway, I want to ask each and every one of you, if you would please do me, your brother, a special favor. Can we come back again and continue this conversation in the very near future? Joe Brown, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, fine. I just want to add this to the mix.
Okay.
You aren't worth freedom. You aren't worth being freed if you're not willing to die for it.
There you
Being
go.
free is not safe.
That's right.
Amen.
Safe Negroes are disgusting because it's time that we showed some fortitude. A lot of us are in both worlds, and one of them are a bunch of servile, whistle responding dogs that lap their tongues out, wag their tails when they get whistled at. Some others, we have ancestors who put scalps on lodge poles. I think we need to revive that kind of concept about what's going on. But entirely too many of us are passive, and we just act like wild dogs in a kennel. We need kennel masters to keep us away from each other's throats so we can be put out as livestock again to serve as either for barter, trade, sale, or labor at masses' convenience. Our cities are basically plantations where the Negroes have no crops to pick, and our so-called leadership, which there is none, it's non-existent, is essentially a bunch of Negroes trying to be Negro overseers on a plantation with no crop. Our whole thing we do about the breeding pattern we have is just like it was on large plantations where you help Massa increase his two-legged cattle herds for barter, trade, sale, or labor. Except there's no labor now. So we've got some things to do, and we've got some dysfunction to deglorify. And I will make an announcement to everybody. I'm working with some bright, young, black geniuses. I call it our Black Brain Trust. They're physicists, they are scientists, they are engineers, they're mathematicians, they work for NASA, they're theoretical physicists doing the Einstein stuff. And what we hope is that instead of trying to get into a market, into a field that is glutted with very deep pockets, we come up with the equivalent of a new .com revolution so we can get in on the ground floor and build from that. We have to make stupid uncool. We have to make being brave cool. We have to make man up and woman up the things to do. We have to embarrass and shame and get rid of dysfunction. We don't need any more Cardi B's, Lizzo the fat hippo lizards. We don't need any more idiots going out buck dancing instead of being reverent to sacrifices and tragedies. We behave like you would think Jews would never behave, like going to Auschwitz and having a dance party in the streets to do what? See, we have to stop embarrassing ourselves and become men and women. And the formula's been there for thousands of years all over the world.
That's
and
right.
we have to start exposing people to it. We need to start getting these charlatans that we have in D.C. that are surrogates for the rainbow. We have to understand there are three functional national parties. One, the jumbo elephant Republicans. Two, the jackass donkey Democrats. And three, the rainbows. And you see, two of them are official and one of them's unofficial. The unofficial one, they have to go through an initiation. For the other two, they just declare. For the rainbows, they got to deal with the 6 B's: unbelt, drop britches, drop boxers, bend, spread butt cheeks, and get banged. And then there are members, and they can be jumbos and rainbows at the same time, or jackasses and rainbows at the same time. And we got a game being run on us by some fools that hate what they are, hate what they want to be, and are trying to impose that sick mess on the rest of the population, starting with us. Now, it's their right to get the freak on in the damn bedrooms. I don't care. But bottom line is the rest of us don't have to join in so that the inmates don't get to take over the asylum and then start running everything from inside the damn asylum. Now
All
let's
right,
get
thank
real
you.
with this
Thank you.
crap. And one other thing on the world view. There are 65 million Afro-Americans, a lot of whom have Native American ancestry, but there are 125 million Afro-Chins. See, China has a situation where they've got roughly 5 guys for every 3 gals. So a lot of them are going down into Africa to get nookie. And they're having black and chin babies, and they're being made citizens of China, and they got a little Africa in southern China. And a lot of the Africans are telling Americans, go screw off. You want to come over here and do Neolithic farming, we don't have any place for you, but we'll show you. But we'd much rather have our relatives who have the chin in them, who can teach us science, technology, engineering, and math, and improve the infrastructure. So we got to start making education and knowledge something else that is respected and revered, because we're too damn stuck on stupid, and that's enough. Now, that's what I would say on that. We need to talk about those things.
Okay, thank you, Judge Brown. Thank you, Judge Brown.
All right.
So will you come back?
Yes, sir. Asus Alderdays.
Not a problem. 'cause I know-
Speaking of which, come Queenla Imhoff, aka Kamala Harris, has not been down to the border for 91 days, even though that's supposed to be her assignment. I guess she's been taking Rosetta Stone so she can learn Espanol, so she can fake it and claim to be Latino.
Okay, thank you.
She's
Thank
good
you.
at that shit, so everybody else gets faked out. I mean, damn.
Okay. Thank you, Judge. Thank you, Judge. Let me
You're
go.
welcome.
Okay. You know, I love you, bro. Okay, so now let's go.
Excuse me, I've been juggling 2 other shows here.
I
with
know.
This one, so
I know. Okay. So let's go to another judge, Judge Hassan El Amin. Will you come back again?
Well, yes, absolutely. I want to say though, you know, we got to think about. There used to be a diagram in the Nation of Islam, and the question was, who will survive the war of Armageddon? Armageddon meaning the battle in the skies. That doesn't mean the literally in the skies. It means in the world of ideas, in the world of justice, in the world of knowledge. And I hear so much dialogue, including that from Judge Joe Brown, and including from Brother.
Moss?
I got yes, Hawk there. We're really talking about, you know, to try to get a physical or geographical location is not feasible. It's just not, until you get yourself mentally and spiritually together on a high plane. So, and this reminds me of what I hear from the brother who is the magistrate, who sounds like a law enforcement officer, really. You know, until you have dignity, you're not going to go anywhere. So we have to lead with integrity, with intelligence, with knowledge, and with spirituality that is not emotionality, but a rational search for good conduct, good thinking, logical thinking, and solve our problems on the mental plane. That's the sword. You know, the sword is really the word. Words are swords. So forget about physical confrontation. Let's talk about mental and spiritual evolution and finding our path through leadership to a much better place. And reparations will come. It'll come because it's due. Everybody knows it's due, but we've got to have the fortitude, the intestinal fortitude, and the high-mindedness to go to that window and demand that restitution, to demand what is ours by the sword of justice.
Thank you, Judge El Amin.
I'll be back. If
All right.
invited. Yes.
Oh, well, you're invited. So now let's go to Rudy Arredondo. Will you come back? Rudy,
Not
unmute.
just interest, but also extremely, you know, it's an education for those of us that have not been educated in terms of the difficulties and the hardships that other communities have suffered. So thank you for that.
Okay, you will come back, right?
Yes, sir, I will. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, if not, I know where your office is and I know where you live. Okay, Raymond, 2 Watson, will you come back?
Absolutely, Jay. Every time you ask, brother, I appreciate the opportunity. So, of course.
You're very welcome. My sweetheart, my sister, Carmen, will you come back, sis?
You know that I will come back every time you ask me, and I just have one thing that I have to say, that we can make a lot of things happen if people stop being so afraid. Everybody's scared. I don't know what they're scared of.
Yeah, they are. It's a lot of scaredy cats out here. But you know what? Dr. King, he wasn't afraid. And I know somebody saying, yeah, but he got shot. Well, think of all the native people that got shot and all the black people that got shot over the years since they've been here. We can't worry about a bullet. So now, let me see who I'm going to go to next. You just hold on, Spike. I'm going to get to you in a minute. Who did I miss? Don Walker, you there?
I'm here, Brother Nightwolf. I want to thank Judge Joe Brown. I admit to being a fan of his on YouTube, but he just went up a whole bunch of notches on my scale. A real pleasure to have him on there. Besides that, what I'd like to say is let us all aspire to a higher standard, and let that standard be where the world wants to go to. And I think at that point, we can all get lifted up out of the problems we have. Thank you, Brother Nightwolf.
Thank you, my brother. Okay, so now, who did I miss? I know who I missed. Joel Siegel, you're next.
Great show. As Judge Joe was rapping, I was thinking about bass lines that I could create to do a rap song with him. But, I you know what, being a musician and a studio recording artist, there's a certain spirit that we musicians have. Rudy's a musician as well, where we don't give a damn about race. We care whether or not you can play the groove.
There you go.
I played with some of the greatest musicians in the world. I played with Parliament Funkadelics. And it's frustrating for me as a musician to kind of go into the political world and not feel that same energy and that vibe that musicians have. I think people can learn a lot from musicians.
Right.
But I'm just honored to be with this, on this show, and I'll come on whenever you want.
Thank you, bro. And now, for the troublemaker in the bunch, my good friend, don't start no mess, Spike.
Ring the bell.
Ring the bell. Ding ding. Will you come back?
I really don't have a choice.
You got that. You got that right.
When you listen to the good Dr. Carmen and you listen to the judge, they both gave clarity to exactly what has been done to our people and exactly where we're at. However, we're going to have to drag them screaming and crying as we go forward. We're going to have to wake them up and keep going and understand it took years to make them as stupid as Judge called them, as backward and ignorant as they are. It took years to break them like you break a dog and how to stay and he stay, set and he set, and don't do nothing but protect. In the words of slavery, I hope the judge is still on: love, honor, respect, and fear thy master. hate thee and those who look like thee, and we're still doing that. So our job is to go forward. We are the same people of Moses. And when he came to free us, we didn't want to go. We didn't know no better. We wanted to go back. He didn't know what he was doing. He's lost. Take us back, Moses. We the same people that told Harriet Tubman, we don't want to run from slavery. We don't want to be free. We are right here on the master. Master treats us good, and we'll turn you in if we get a chance. All that negativity that our people do that the judge talked about, we still got to press forward with or without them. All that negativity of turning their back on that sister the way she said, you should see the amount of times it happened to me from 1966. If you love your people, respect your people, try to protect your people, you're going to have to swallow a lot of what was done to them, like the exploitation movies of the 70s, the negative rap of the 80s, all this hate of calling yourself the N-word and your women the B and H. We got to work through all that madness that was done and still find those with clear minds so we can go forward till the rest catch up. We have no choice other than oppression. So when you understand that, and I would hope the judge keeps saying everything he says, because if we don't fix those problems that I see today, and I'm going to say this, Nightwolf, the Klan was together for 170 some years. But out of that 170 some years, they have yet to kill as many Black Americans as we have since the 1970s. The Vietnam War, over 5 years of killing and wounded. We have since that time wounded and killed more Black people than the Vietnam War. So I know how backward and lost we are. In this city and across the river last year, we shot 1,000 people, and we about to break the record this year. So you talking to somebody who knows the madness, because I was the one that pushed the National Peace and Justice Summits of the 90s to save as many of our young people as we could, and you're going to have to do it again. So I know we extremely lost, and I'm sorry that happened to that sister, but I'm telling you, there was a slave that felt defeated and got up and still kept pushing. There was Blacks in Jim Crow that felt defeated and got up and still kept pushing. There was Blacks who couldn't be seated in restaurants and took them beatings and went to jail, but they got up and kept pushing. And the reason you keep pushing is because you got the blood of the people who came from Africa, who are still alive and still pushing, and we have no choice, Wolf. We have no choice but to go in spite of what our people don't know, in spite of how backward they might be, how slow they might be. I would say to each and every one of you, I'd rather see Black children with an ink pen and a pencil than a 9mm gun. I'd rather see them with a book bag on their back than a bag of dope. I'd rather see them in a classroom than a cell room. And I'm going to keep fighting until one day he's in that classroom where he belongs and he has a life. So I'm saying all of you, you said something of value that has to be said, and we still got to move forward.
Okay, thank you, Spike. Sandra, do you have anything to say before I go to my closing words?
Yeah, I just want to say real quickly that we know the response historically and even up to now, the response to any type of aggression, the response to any rebellion, the response to any attempt to bring change and clarity to these issues, the response has been to divide us. They create laws to divide us. They create protocols and policies and movements to divide us. We have to unite. And when I say Blendians, I mean Blendians of all colors and races. We have to unite. Together, we can build the infrastructure, we can tighten the infrastructure, and we can make it so that we cannot be denied. Unity.
Absolutely. So I have this to say. Brothers and sisters, your brother or your sister don't have to look like you to be your brother or your sister. But if you stand up, stand your ass up. And if you don't want to be a part of this game, set your ass down. Get out of the conversation. I've heard so many of my elders say, I don't know what it's going to take. Well, I know what it's going to take. Because This is at a point of not just survival of any race of people, but the survival of humanity. So if you got a game plan, bring it to the table. If you got nonsense, you take that mess somewhere else, because we ain't got time for it. This world is dying, and we're dying right along with it.
Amen.
I do not want to, when I have to leave this world, go and face Creator, Wakantanka, Yahweh, Jehovah, whatever name you put on God. And he says, well, you had an opportunity to speak, but you wouldn't speak up. You had an opportunity to stand, but you wouldn't stand up. You had an opportunity to feed somebody that was hungry, that lived right next door to you, but you wouldn't do it. You had an opportunity to give a drink of water to somebody that really needed it on a hot day. Why didn't you do it? I don't want to hear any of those questions when I leave here. So if you want to get on a train and ride with us, get on there with integrity, honesty, and most of all, self-respect. My parents would always tell us, especially my mother, you got to have self-respect, because if you don't respect yourself, then you don't respect anybody else. And my mother said, I will beat your ass if I have to beat the life out of you to teach you self-respect. I know somebody said, you got to stop cursing. I'm not cursing. I'm just telling it like it is. And all of you are very familiar with some of those words that I use. So stand up, take heed, and learn to love your brothers and your sisters. Everybody's got some kind of fault. But if we can't stand up and protect each other, and men, when you see a woman being abused, and if you don't step in there and stop that man from abusing her, then you're a damn coward. So I'll leave you with this. I love you all of you, even those of you that make it almost impossible to love. I love you anyway. So get your act together, get up on your feet, and move forward. We'll talk to you again real soon. I'm Winter Nightwolf, and this is the Indigenous People's Truth. Justice for all. The most dangerous show on media anywhere. If you're on YouTube, go to YouTube and like my show and subscribe and leave a comment. We'll talk to you again next week. Danada, Goai, Wado. I love you all of you. Peace.